And then what did you make of Sophie Cunningham's flagrant foul on JC towards the end?
It was a flagrant foul.
You think it's like defending Caitlin or defending the team, or how do you view just how it all?
I view it as a flagrant foul.
That's about the game too.
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys came for basketball.
Yeah,
Let's talk about basketball.
Yeah.
Come on now.
What do you think of just how you all were able to pull away in the second half, Caitlin, in particular?
We're going to the Commissioner Cup Championship.
Let's
That's
go!
pretty exciting. Y'all want to talk about that? Let's talk about that.
What do you think, again, in the second half?
WNBA record. This is her second season. And you put the numbers together, that's like 10 seasons. That girl did it in 10 seasons. That means she had won a season. Caitlin Clark is... when Caitlin Clark gets to 10 seasons, she's going to have 100 of these. And y'all can't get a girl her roses. Now, I don't like the fact that she be getting woke because she don't want all these lesbians to be mad at it. At the end of the day, is the woman putting in the work, she's putting in the work.
All right, settle in, because we need to talk. We need to talk about the biggest story in sports right now. A story that's unfolding like a high-stakes drama where every single play, every whistle, every social media post feels like it could be a turning point. We're talking about Caitlin Clark and the WNBA. Imagine for a second the league finally basking in a spotlight brighter than it's seen in decades, fueled by a once-in-a-generation talent. Arenas packed, ratings through the roof, a genuine cultural phenomenon. Sounds like a dream, right? But what if that dream is teetering on the edge of a nightmare? What if the very star generating this golden era is being treated less like a cherished MVP and more like a human pinball in a game rigged against her? The whispers are no longer whispers, they're growing into a roar from frustrated fans. Is Caitlin Clark actually going to be forced to consider leaving the WNBA? Not because she can't handle it, but because the league itself can't handle her success without a side of what looks suspiciously like sabotage. This isn't just about a rookie season anymore. It's about whether the WNBA is ready to embrace its future or risk fumbling its most valuable player right out the door. Let's rewind the tape, but not too far, because the Caitlin Clark effect detonated with the force of a supernova the moment she stepped onto the professional court. We all saw what she did in college. The logo threes, the mind-bending passes, the sheer magnetic pull of her game that had grandmas and frat boys alike tuning into women's college basketball in unprecedented numbers. That wasn't a fluke, that was a preview. The WNBA knew they were getting a star, but did anyone truly grasp the scale? We're talking about viewership numbers for WNBA games on major networks not just ticking up, but exploding by percentages that make statisticians weep tears of joy. Her Indiana Fever games, home and away, became the hottest ticket in town. Teams weren't just selling out their regular arenas, they were scrambling to move games to massive NBA venues just to try and satisfy the colossal demand. Her jersey, it didn't just sell well, it became the top-selling jersey across all sports upon its release. More than LeBron, more than Mahomes, more than any global soccer icon. One player. That's not just impact, that's a paradigm shift. She was, and is, a walking, talking, three-point shooting economic stimulus package for a league that has fought tooth and nail for every ounce of mainstream recognition. So with this unprecedented wave of attention, revenue, and excitement, you'd expect the league to roll out the diamond-studded red carpet, right? Protect its most bankable asset, showcase her to the world, and ride this wave to glory. Well, the welcome party, if you can call it that, felt less like a celebration and more like an initiation into a demolition derby. From the jump, it was clear that opponents had a very specific and very physical game plan for Clark. This wasn't just welcome to the pros kid toughness. This was a sustained campaign of hip checks that sent her flying, off-ball shoves that had no relation to the play, elbows that found her ribs and head with alarming regularity, and closeouts so aggressive they looked like attempts to occupy her personal space permanently. The infamous cheap shot from Kennedy Carter, a blindside shoulder check completely away from the ball, wasn't an isolated incident. It was just the one that blew up the internet the loudest. Then there was the Marina Mabrey full-body shove, more akin to an NFL linebacker trying to shed a block than a basketball play. It became a grim, predictable pattern, a highlight reel of aggression that left fans and even some neutral observers wincing. And where were the referees in all this? That's the million-dollar question that echoed through living rooms and social media feeds after almost every game. Too often, it felt like they were auditioning for roles in a magic show, specializing in the disappearing whistle trick. Blatant, sometimes dangerous fouls against Clark were either ignored entirely, or if a whistle did mercifully sound, called as common fouls. This perceived leniency wasn't just frustrating, it was dangerous. It sent a clear, unspoken message to the rest of the league. It's open season. The normal rules, they're a bit more flexible when it comes to her. Each non-call, each instance of what looked like blatant targeting going unpunished was like a green light for the next opponent to take their shot, to push the boundaries even further. It created an environment where the game felt less about skill versus skill and more about how much physical punishment one player could endure before breaking. This perceived lack of protection, this official indifference, didn't go unnoticed. In fact, it birthed a grassroots movement online, a digital army of frustrated fans who took matters into their own hands. The To Protect Caitlin Clark hashtag became a rallying cry. Viewers turned into amateur forensic analysts, meticulously replaying clips in slow motion, drawing red circles around illegal screens, highlighting uncalled travels from opponents just before they clobbered Clark, and screaming into the digital void for a flagrant foul, any flagrant foul that often never came. It was like watching a city ignore its main power plant while it was actively on fire. These fans weren't just casual observers, they were the new eyeballs Clark had brought to the league, and they were witnessing what they felt was a profound injustice, a failure to protect the very player who was the reason many of them were watching in the first place. Their collective outrage was a testament to how obvious the targeting felt and how inadequate the official response seemed. Compounding the frustration was the deafening silence, or at least the very muted response from the WNBA front office. The institution that should have been her staunchest defender, the one with the most to gain from her success and safety, seemed hesitant to take a strong public stance. Sure, there were generic statements about player safety and the physicality of the game, the kind of corporate speak that says nothing while pretending to say something. But for a league suddenly under an intense national microscope, many felt these platitudes were woefully insufficient. The perception, fair or not, was that the league was quicker to comment on dress code violations or minor off-court squabbles than it was to address the systematic on-court battery its biggest star was enduring. This apparent inaction created a vacuum, and into that vacuum rushed speculation. Was the league secretly okay with this? Were they afraid of alienating veteran players? Or were they simply caught flat-footed, unprepared for the intensity of the spotlight Clark had dragged them into? Then, as if the on-court situation wasn't bizarre enough, a truly perplexing narrative began to bubble up from certain corners of the sports media and among some former players. The idea that Caitlin Clark herself was somehow to blame for the aggression she was facing. The arguments were frankly astounding. She's too confident. She talks too much trash. She hasn't shown enough deference to the veterans. She brings it on herself. Let that sink in. We are talking about professional sports, a realm literally built on ego, fierce competition, relentless psychological warfare, and yes, a copious amount of trash talk. Michael Jordan didn't become a global icon by being demure. Larry Bird could dismantle an opponent's entire psyche before the game even started with his legendary barbs. Their antics are celebrated, enshrined as part of their competitive fire. But when Caitlin Clark, a young woman dominating her sport, exhibits similar confidence or engages in the same kind of on-court chatter, it's suddenly twisted into a provocation, an open invitation for physical retaliation. This wasn't just a double standard. It felt like a triple reverse somersault with a twist standard designed specifically for her. This blame the victim mentality seemed to dovetail with an undercurrent of what many termed gatekeeping within the league. The narrative suggested that some veteran players, who had undeniably toiled for years, often in relative obscurity, fighting for every scrap of media attention and every dollar in their contracts, resented the immediate, overwhelming adulation and financial windfall that Clark seemed to effortlessly command. She hadn't paid her dues in the traditional sense, they implied. But what dues exactly? The dues of playing in front of have sparse crowds for years, the dues of limited media coverage. Clark was, in a very real sense, changing the entire economic landscape of the league, potentially making everyone's dues worth a whole lot more. It's a complex human emotion, perhaps, seeing someone achieve instantly what you've strived a lifetime for, but from a purely pragmatic, collective bargaining, league growth perspective, it was self-defeating. Here was the rising tide meant to lift all boats, and some seem more interested in trying to poke holes in her hull. The much-hyped rivalry with Angel Reese, consistently pushed by media and seemingly embraced by some, often felt less like a classic sporting duel and more like a symptom of this broader tension. Think about the iconic rivalries: Magic versus Bird, Federer versus Nadal, Ali versus Frazier. These were built on a bedrock of fierce competition, yes, but also a deep, often grudging, mutual respect. They pushed each other to be better. What unfolded with Clark and Reese, particularly after incidents like Reese's flagrant foul to Clark's head, followed by on-bench celebrations from her teammates, felt that different. It often seemed tinged with a personal animosity that overshadowed the athletic contest. Clark, for the most part, appeared focused on playing basketball, on trying to drag a young Indiana Fever team to victories. Meanwhile, some opponents, and by extension some media narratives, seemed more focused on her, on making a statement, on diminishing her. It often felt like a manufactured conflict being used to justify or excuse behavior that, in any other context, would be roundly condemned, turning a potential epic rivalry into a sideshow of cheap shots and petty grievances. And through this gauntlet, Caitlin Clark has been held to an absolutely impossible standard of behavior and emotional response. It's a classic, inescapable catch-22. If she reacts to a hard foul, if she shows visible frustration, if she argues a call with an official, all perfectly normal, human responses in a high-intensity physical contest, she's immediately branded immature, entitled, can't handle the pressure, cracking. Not tough enough for the pros. But conversely, when she doesn't react, when she absorbs a brutal hit, picks herself up off the floor, and stoically walks away without complaint, she's then criticized for being arrogant, distant, cold, not a team player, or not showing enough emotion. There is literally no correct way for her to act in the eyes of her harshest critics. Every conceivable human reaction is meticulously reframed as a fundamental character flaw. Meanwhile, the players delivering the initial aggressive acts often face a fraction of the scrutiny for their own lack of professionalism or dangerous play. This relentless psychological game, played out 24/7 in the media and on social platforms, adds an enormous unseen burden to the already immense pressure she carries. Let's talk about the raw economics for a moment, because the numbers don't lie, and they paint a damning picture of self-sabotage. There was a period when Clark was briefly sidelined with an injury. What happened to the WNBA's viewership during that time? It didn't just dip, it plummeted by a reported 55%. Let that number sink in. One player sits out, and more than half the entire television audience for the entire league vanishes. Poof, gone. This wasn't just a popular player, this was the market. This data point alone eviscerated the argument some were trying to make that it's not just Caitlin Clark bringing in the viewers. Well, it turns out to a very significant degree, it is Caitlin Clark. She is, in effect, single-handedly funding a large portion of the league's newfound prosperity, including, ironically, the salaries of some of the very players who seem to resent her presence or participate in the on-court aggression. The financial health of the league, its ability to negotiate better TV deals, to attract bigger sponsors, is now inextricably linked to her presence and her appeal. This isn't just about one season's drama. The WNBA is risking serious long-term damage with how the situation is being handled or mishandled. What message does this send to the next Caitlin Clark, to the countless talented young girls playing basketball in high school and college, watching this unfold with wide eyes? They see the league's biggest draw, its most transformative talent in a generation, being treated less like a queen and more like a court jester to be knocked around. They see her success seemingly inviting punishment, not just praise. Why would the next phenom, the next player with the potential to elevate the league even further, eagerly sign up for an environment that appears, from the outside, to be actively hostile to its brightest stars? The league could be inadvertently poisoning the well for future talent, making the WNBA a far less attractive destination. And don't forget the corporate sponsors. Brands invest in growth, excitement, positive narratives, and aspirational figures. They are notoriously allergic to public relations disasters, internal strife, and a product that looks unstable, unprofessional, or frankly mean-spirited. By not unequivocally protecting Clark and championing her, the league isn't just risking one player's loyalty, it's damaging its brand and potentially scaring away the very corporate dollars it needs to fuel future growth. This brings us inevitably to the increasingly loud speculation about Caitlin Clark's future. If the environment doesn't change, if the league doesn't step up, could she actually leave? And this is where the narrative could pivot from a story of mistreatment to one of ultimate game-changing leverage. Two main escape routes are constantly being discussed by fans and analysts. The first, and perhaps more conventional, is the European option. Top women's basketball leagues in Europe, in places like Spain, Turkey, Russia, though geopolitical situations can affect this, and Italy, offer lucrative contracts, often exceeding what WNBA players make, especially for stars of Clark's caliber. More than just money, these leagues often provide an environment where stars are revered, protected, and allowed to simply play basketball without the unique brand of off-court drama and on-court targeting that has characterized her WNBA rookie experience. She could earn millions, play high-level basketball, and reclaim a measure of peace and respect. It would be a massive blow to the WNBA, but an entirely understandable career choice for her. The second scenario is the stuff of sports legend, the kind of move that would send shockwaves through the entire global sports landscape, the billionaire's gambit or the new league theory. Picture this, a wealthy investor or a consortium of them seeing the WNBA's apparent fumbling of its golden goose, approaches Clark with an offer that's impossible to ignore. It could be a staggering sum, say $50 million, as some have wildly speculated, to simply sit out a season, thereby demonstrably proving the WNBA's utter dependence on her star power as viewership and revenue crater. Or even more audaciously, they could offer to bankroll an entirely new professional women's basketball league in North America, built from the ground up around Caitlin Clark. She would be its face, its heart, its primary marketing engine. This wouldn't just be competition, it would be a direct existential threat to the WNBA, a revolutionary act aimed at building a new empire, potentially on the ashes of an old one that failed to adapt or appreciate its most valuable asset. While it sounds like a fantasy sports league fever dream, the very fact that such radical ideas are being openly discussed underscores the perceived severity of the WNBA's Clark problem. And here's the unspoken truth that hangs over all of this. Caitlin Clark has options. Serious options. She doesn't need the WNBA in the same way the WNBA, at this specific moment in its history, desperately needs her. Her talent is global, her brand is already massive, she could thrive financially and professionally in various arenas, whether that's overseas, in broadcasting, or through a galaxy of endorsements. The league, on the other hand, has tasted a level of mainstream relevance and financial uplift directly attributable to her, and the thought of that vanishing is, or should be, terrifying to its stakeholders. This power dynamic, though perhaps not explicitly wielded by Clark herself, is the undeniable subtext of this entire saga. She holds a leverage that few athletes in any sport ever possess, especially this early in their careers. So the WNBA stands at a critical juncture, a genuine crossroads that will define its trajectory for years, possibly decades to come. It was handed a golden ticket, a generational talent who delivered on every ounce of hype, and then some. Yet the narrative surrounding its brightest star has become dangerously entangled with perceptions of unfairness, inadequate protection, and even institutional complicity in allowing her to be targeted. Moving forward, if the league wishes to retain not just Clark, but the millions of new fans she's brought with her, it will require more than just crossing its fingers and hoping things blow over. It will likely demand a clear, unequivocal, and very public demonstration that it values and will fiercely protect its stars. All its stars, but with a particular emphasis on the one currently carrying the weight of its aspirations. It means fostering a culture where new, transcendent talent is embraced as a collective boon, not a threat to the established order. It requires a fundamental shift, a recognition that the old ways of doing things, the old excuses, are simply not good enough for this new high-stakes era that Caitlin Clark has almost single-handedly ushered in. Ultimately, Caitlin Clark is caught in an impossible, infuriating paradox. The league needs her for its very lifeblood, its ratings, its revenue, its relevance. Yet elements within and around that same league seem to foster or permit a culture that actively punishes her for the very qualities that make her so extraordinary. She's the undisputed headliner, but she's also consistently cast as the villain in someone else's psychodrama, or at best, the designated punching bag who's just supposed to take it with a smile. If she stays under the current conditions, she's essentially signing up for more of the same. More uncalled fouls, more silent whistles, more absurd media narratives blaming her for being assaulted. If she chooses to leave, whether it's for the shores of Europe or some bold, new, disruptive venture, it won't be an act of surrender or an admission of failure. It will be an act of profound self-respect, a courageous declaration that her immense talent, her hard-earned well-being, and her professional dignity are worth more than a league that seems at times tragically unwilling or incapable of valuing them appropriately. And so, we are left with one final, sobering, and perhaps deeply unsettling question. What happens the day after Caitlin Clark potentially leaves the WNBA? When the arenas are suddenly half empty again? When the record-breaking viewership numbers collapse back to pre-Clark levels? When the mainstream sports media turns its fickle attention elsewhere because the Caitlin Clark show has packed up and left town? What will that silence sound like? It will sound like a league finally, and perhaps belatedly being forced to confront the colossal shadow of the superstar it drove away. It will sound like missed opportunity. It will sound like regret. It will sound perhaps like the WNBA becoming for a new generation of sports fans little more than a trivia question about a phenomenon it was too proud, too short-sighted, or too broken to fully embrace. Caitlin Clark's story is far from over, but her next move might just be the one that dictates whether the WNBA truly capitalizes on its revolution or becomes a cautionary tale. What do you think? Is the WNBA handling the Caitlin Clark phenomenon correctly? What would you do if you were in her shoes? And what does the league need to do right now to ensure its brightest star continues to shine within its orbit? Drop your thoughts, your frustrations, your theories in the comments below. I really want to hear what you think. And if this got you fired up or made you think, do me a favor and hit that like button, and definitely subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that are shaping the sports world. Thanks for hanging with me on this one. I'll catch you in the next video.